This session, we talk about the themes of nature and nurture. Nature in the form of nature development in Singapore, and nurture in the form of the role of parent-child relationship when children become addicted. We have two colleagues to share their ideas on nature and nurture, Dr. Harvey Neo from Geography and Dr. Choo HyeKyung from Social Work. Let me introduce the first speaker, Dr. Harvey Neo. He is an assistant professor of geography at NUS, trained broadly as a socio-economic geographer. He has two interests, research interests that is. Number one, the political economy of the livestock industry, and that was his PhD topic. And secondly, nature-society issues. Now for the latter, he is particularly interested in the discourse and development of eco-cities in Asia. Now, I should mention that Harvey's presentation will be one of two chapters in a forthcoming book. This is a book emerging from the SRN, the first book to emerge from the Singapore Research Nexus, titled Singapore Unbounded. Now, Singapore Unbounded will be hopefully published next year, 2011. As the book title suggests, it will explore ways in which Singapore negotiates transnational flows of people, ideas, investments, and information, the unbounding of Singapore. Two of the papers presented in this event, Harvey's, and later on in the afternoon, Dr. Lionel Wee's presentation on Singapore as a global city and the language policies supporting this vision. Now, these two papers will be chapters in this book. The title of Harvey's talk is The Nature of Development and the Development of Nature, A View from Singapore. Now, as usual, we will hear from both speakers for about 25 to 30 minutes before they come on stage for questions and answer. Harvey Neo, please.
Thank you. So I must start by qualifying that my presentation will be somewhat provocative and almost polemic. One objective for this presentation is to trigger discussions on the place of nature and development in Singapore. The presentation might seem a little bit complex, but it's actually quite straightforward. So if you bear with me, I'll show you how straightforward it is. It involves a series of related arguments, but the end goal is to show how the Singapore government has managed to shape the focus of nature-society relationships to their own agenda. I specifically want to point out how the government has actively sought to develop nature, environmental related science and technology, and why this development cannot, or rather why it should not be questioned. But at the same time, I argue that such a focus of nature is partial. Okay? And because of this partiality, I attempt to show how other facets of nature are silenced, in part due to such a technological gaze on nature. So when we talk about nature and development relationship, we can discern two very broad kinds of relations. The first one, we can call it, development as antagonistic to nature. This is something that we should be all familiar with. In the press, we often read about stories how activists try to protect nature from further development. So we hear a lot of stories about nature conservation and how conservationists try to block particular forms of development. It could be any kinds of development, but usually it's urban development. The second kind of broad relationship is what I would call nature as the subject of development. So in this scenario, in this case, nature works with development. And examples of this kinds of relationship, or rather outcomes of this kind of relationship includes green technologies, for example, clean water technologies, energy conservation technology, or just very broadly green development. So in this kinds of relationship, nature is, we can say, being co-opted into the development process. not just nature, but technology and nature together co-opted into the economic development process. Of course, the meanings of nature and development are somewhat different in both these conceptions. And the nuances of nature-development relationship are simplified too. So there are a lot of degrees of differences that it's a bit simplified. But there are two very important generalizable relationships between nature and development, often seen in public discourse and sometimes in scholarly discourse as well. In any case, this kinds of conceptual distinction is made for heuristic purposes. So it's a good tool for us to investigate the empirical kinds of situation that we'll talk about later. So let's go back to the first relationship. This is commonly understood, like I said earlier, and almost commonsensical. Indeed, a lot of people will typify nature-development relationship as this, antagonistic. Okay, so the example I said earlier about urban sprawl versus green activism, that kind of relationship or outcomes of relationship. What these environmental activists essentially do is to question at a very normative level the kinds of development that society needs. Of course, they are using the protection of green spaces as kind of foil to question development itself. So in effect, what they do is to open up debates about the very nature of development. So I will argue throughout my presentation that this kinds of debate about the nature of development is very rare in Singapore. Okay, and I will kind of show you why that's the case. The second relationship is a little bit more interesting. So let's look a little bit closely about the second relationship. Oops, I forgot to click the second relationship, but since I just said everything, this is what I just said, okay? So the second relationship is the one that I want to focus a little bit on because it's not so commonsensical. It's not so self-evident. So nature as subject of development. We can also think of this relationship as nature being subjected to the impulses of economic development. Okay, so nature is being used as a tool for economic development. In general, this kinds of nature development relationship seeks to transform the way we exploit nature and the environment, specifically for material gains. Okay, of course, they do also produce beneficial environmental outcomes, very broadly speaking. That has to be the case. However, not all positive environmental actions will produce monetary gains, right? So the reverse is not true. So in that sense, the chief concern here is whether any particular environmental technological initiative or action can be economically viable. Okay, in other words, how much we can reap the environment for profits and how viable it will be is not always easy to predict. Okay, so for environmental technologies to proceed, there must be some sense that this will not be a loss-making process, that somehow our investments have to be paid back. So some example of this is, so for example, a person who believes in the potential gain of, broadly speaking, the green sector or environmental technology is President Obama, who has recently pledged to invest $150 billion in the American renewable energy sector. So this renewable energy sector is just one tiny component of the broad spectrum of environmental technology sector. So this is just one. So he obviously believes in both the viability and the necessity of such initiatives. A 2009 study conducted by a German, it was commissioned by the German government, indicates that this sector, what they call the green technology market, is worth more than $1.3 trillion in 2005. And they project that the value of this market will double to $3 trillion in the year 2020. Okay. A more recent study is even more bullish. Okay. This It's a study in UK, and it was just released this year. And it says that the green economy in UK alone is worth 112 billion pounds. The global market is worth, currently, they say, worth 3.2 trillion pounds a year. Okay, obviously, there's a very wide difference in the kinds of projections the German and the UK government has said. But I suspect it's pretty much due to the use of green economy as a term by the British government. I think it's more encompassing than the German use of the word green technology. So in any case, this proves that the market is big, what we can broadly call environmental technological market. So the provocative question that I pose is this: assuming that there is a bias towards the second kind of nature development relationship, the one I just said about environmental technology as nature as a subject of development, assuming that there is such a bias in Singapore, why is it so? Okay, I offer two main reasons. The first one is, I guess, a perennial explanation for a lot of social-political phenomena in Singapore. And it is this fact that Singapore is what we call a developmental state. And the second reason that I use is and I will elaborate later, this point about the post-political condition of Singapore. Let's go to the first reason first. So when we talk about Singapore as a developmental state, we are trying to suggest that development, the idea of development in Singapore is conceived very specifically, almost very narrowly, if you push the argument. And this is because for the Singaporean government, development, or economic development to be precise, is very, very critical. Why is it very critical? Because it's very much tied to the legitimization of the government. Okay, so the usual argument goes that if the Singapore economy is doing well, it shows that the Singapore government is doing well. Okay, so there is kind of a trade-off between all kinds of weaknesses that you may perceive in the argument. You can overlook those kinds of weaknesses if there is economic growth led by the government. So there's a legitimization aspect there. Singapore is also very heavily planned. This is part of what it means to be a developmental state. And we often have this almost like a national ideology, but maybe not everyone accepts to such ideology, that public interest overrides private interest. Okay, I try to minimize using scary quotes like this, but in this case I have to, because the whole point, the whole contention about point number 4 is that what constitutes private and private interest is not really clear-cut at all. Okay, so that's one of the problems with this idea of public interest overriding private interest. And fifth, there is an overall faith in science, technology, rationality, pragmatism. Okay, this is, if you are Singaporean, you are drilled this almost from young, point number 5. This suggests that, the Singapore government or the Singapore state is almost total in its power, but it's not the case. The government does not always define the environmental agenda completely. That's not the case. In fact, we can broadly discern a few periods, 3 periods and this is, again, generalizing for the sake of having an overall picture. We can discern 3 periods. And the first period would be the 1960s to 1980s. And this is where the idea of pragmatism, national building, and economic imperative is probably the strongest, in an absence of any other values to attach to nature and development in Singapore. So that's the first phase. Then we have a phase in the 1990s to probably late 1990s, very early 2000, where there was an increase in contestations over environmental issues. Okay, there's a lot of reasons why this is the case. You can say that it's a result of opening up of political spaces then, could be one reason. But more fundamentally, it's the realization by some people or some organized groups that economic development without considering nature or environment is inadequate. So that's the driving force for them to increasingly question the kinds of developmental projects or developmental ideas that the Singapore state had for Singapore in that period of time. And the third period, the most recent one, we can trace it from the mid-2000 to present moment. And this is a big push to advance new environmental technologies, ostensibly for sustainable development. Okay. So this last phase is focused on really making nature work for us. And in so doing, we'll make a better society. So how did this happen? To answer this question, we need to look at how matters of national interest are conducted in political discourse, in the political sphere. So here, I suggest that what we are seeing now here in Singapore is a kind of post-political condition. This is a term used by some social political theories. And what it means to be in a post-political condition, first off, it means that the society avoids ideological divisions in favor of a common ideal or good. This is probably the most distinctive feature of a post-political society. Mind you, it doesn't mean that such a common ideal is obtained through force. There is still discussion, but the discussion always has one end result, which is that there's some kind of commonality and consensus that everyone is happy to abide by. So this is the first feature of the post-political society. And related to that, a post-political society will respond to and solve problems in ways that do not dent the existing system. Okay, so whatever it is, whatever solution we implement, it will never dramatically change the fabric of our social political modes of governance in Singapore. So this is another feature. And the third feature is that ultimately a post-political society can be seen as an illiberal democracy. Why? Because it seems that we are having more democracy, we are having more groups discussing about the social political issues, but what they argue is that eventually this all boils down to a form of almost coerced consensus, almost. Okay, so it's actually limiting freedoms. So what is a post-political condition when we transpose it to our empirical focus today, which is nature and development? If we look specifically at the notion of sustainability, this is how it will pan out. Eric Swingerdow, using the exact idea of post-political conditions, suggests that, and quote, there is no such thing as a singular nature around which a policy of sustainability can be constructed. So this suggests that sustainability or the environment is so multifaceted, and any attempt to try to redefine sustainability in a particular way is wrong, because it precludes all kinds of possibility about nature and sustainability. So in the case of Singapore, I would argue that we have focused very much on nature as a product, and to the detriment of this understanding of nature in a more humanistic way. So, sorry. So I'm not trying to say that, you know, focusing on environmental technology is wrong, because indeed there's nothing wrong with developing green technology. Indeed, it's actually very crucial and critical for us to invest more into green technology, things like electric cars, for example, or green buildings, for example. And we recall that, you know, this sector is so lucrative, and there's no reason why we should turn our backs to this sector. But like I said earlier, sustainable development is itself multifaceted and very much ideologically driven. What we want to say, well, at least what I want to say today, is that it's not really just about economic development. It's also about social, political, and of course, environment. Okay. So if the focus now is very much on the kinds of environmental technologies in Singapore, what happened to the green voices? What happened to the activists? What happened to the voice which used to question the very nature of development that Singapore has undertaken? Where has such political engagement gone? We'll leave these questions aside first, because before we can answer those questions, we need to understand the partiality of the Singapore government towards certain favorite environmental concerns historically. So this has been from day one, the Singapore government has been interested in those kinds of issues, even before the advent of all kinds of environmental technologies that we are seeing now. Okay, so we can group these pet environmental concerns as under the Brown Agenda, and under the Brown Agenda we can say things like issues like reduce, reuse, recycle, sanitation, freshwater provision. These are our pet concerns. Okay, and to elaborate further, things like energy efficiency, waste disposal technology, clean technologies. So all these are very close to environmental technologies, and this has always historically been the kind of things that the Singapore government embarked in gusto. Okay, they are very interested in that. So this is in contrast to what we call the Green Agenda, which looks at issues like conserving nature sites, bring nature back to the cities, and this is another use of scary quotes. Nature in this case means, for the activists, real nature, not parks, not things like that. That is good too, but they are also concerned about, natural nature. In other words, it sounds very weird to say that, but there is a distinction between parks and nature in the eyes of environmental activists. Okay, so let's further look at this Brown Agenda. How did the government explicitly develop this agenda to include environmental technologies? So the Brown Agenda issues, right, have developed naturally into a broad range of initiatives to do with urban green development in general. So we have very recently established the Center for Livable Cities, whose primary aim is to distill Singapore's expertise in urban management. Okay, some of this, although the Tianjin Eco-City is not really related to CLC, but another example would be this, the Tianjin Eco-City project, where the Singapore government is said to be able to share its software and extensive experience in sustainable urban development. This is very much a private sector-led initiative. Of course, there's a lot of government involvement. Keppel Corporation is very heavily involved in this cooperation with the Tianjin City. So what Keppel lists as their expertise are things like environmental protection, resource conservation, recycling economy, and all the rest there. Another ways of advancing environmental technology is water technology. Okay, so we have people saying that, or actually we self-acknowledge ourselves as a world leader in virtually every aspect of water management. Okay, so as this quote in the Straits Times illustrate, and to give an indication of how vibrant this sector is, the largest single investment by a Singaporean company in South Africa is actually to build a water desalination plant. That's for $800 million US. The irony of this development of this kind of urban technology, which broadly wants to create the kind of green city that we envision, the irony of this is that this concept of green city or eco-city is actually rooted not just in environment sustainability, but it has its roots in social, political sustainability as well. So if we look at this very first comprehensive Bible on eco-city, they listed all kinds of things that an eco-city should be or should equip themselves with. And all these are fine, all these are good and all. But notice that there are some ideals which not just Singapore, but a lot of cities embarking on eco-cities conveniently ignore. One is this: nurture social activism. Okay, and there are some more, a little bit more controversial ones. Promote voluntary simplicity and discourage excessive consumption of material goods. Okay, this can never happen in Singapore. Why? Because we thrive on consumerism. There's no way that these kinds of ideals would be propagated at all, because it goes against the very grain of the Singapore's ideology, which is to consume, produce. Okay, and this as well. Increase awareness of local environment and bioregion. So in other words, this last point about eco-city encourages people to actually become semi-environmental activists. Okay. So we can now go back to the question earlier about the loss of the environmentalist voice. On one hand, okay. Why did this happen? On one hand, we see that the government is very enthusiastically embracing and developing all kinds of environment-related technologies. So this is in keeping with its perpetual interest in brown issues. So this is on one hand. On the other hand, hardcore green voices seem to be losing ground. Okay, part of the reason can be attributed to the kinds of post-political condition that I detailed earlier, where there is a diminishing of direct political engagement between the state and activists. Okay, the following quotes will attest to this. So this is by a URA senior planner, and it says that the tensions between, and this he's commenting on a tussle to expand a particular golf course in Singapore. And he says that the tensions between environmentalists and the golf course management should be resolved through mutual discussions and compromises. We at the URA do not take sides, nor do we dictate how negotiations should move forward. So this is a very good example of the kind of post-political condition we are talking about, where the government retreats to us, instead of being an actor in these kinds of discussion, become what they call a facilitator. Okay, they become facilitator, and the whole contention has to have only one result, is that there has to be a consensus. Okay, I never believe in consensus, because I think in a consensus, there's always one side that loses out. Okay, so, and if the one losing out is perpetually the same side, then there's a problem with the kinds of consensus that we are talking about. So this is something we need to think about. And there's a second quote, and this is, again, from the same, commenting on the same issue, the expansion of a particular golf course in Singapore. This activist says that there was a time in the late 1980s and early 1990s that we have almost complete access to policymakers, especially those key officials. I remember when I just exposed where he's from, but Nature Society of Singapore were actually informed of possible planning decisions that might impact the environment. We were well regarded in that sense. Okay, he claims that he cannot tell what has changed, but now he feels it's very hard to penetrate the decision-making process. This crunchy golf course, I just reviewed where this site is. This crunchy golf course, we knew about it literally the same time as the public, but by then it's too late. Approval has been given, and we are left with wrangling over the nitty-gritty details of its specific construction. We want to be able to say, or to at least have the option to say that, hey, another golf course is not a good idea. Okay? So while state agencies are warned to retreat to a role of a facilitator, another environmentalist comments in exasperation, they would not need to facilitate if they had not approved the application to build a new golf course in the first place. Okay, so that's the kind of a feeling on the ground by the environmentalists. So this is part of a complex set of reasons. So I want to quickly conclude. So to reiterate the kinds of points that I mentioned earlier, the first one is this: there is a changing role of the state with regards to issues on nature and development. So from a very active participant, actor, to become a facilitator. Okay, of course, some people question whether this facilitating role is actually what it seems to be. Okay, so they question whether this is the best role that the government can take. And this is affect environmental technologies as one of the next global growth poles. Okay? And in the case of Singapore, such technologies are legitimization and representation of our green credentials. Okay, nobody will dare say that clean water technology and green cities are bad. Not a single person who would say that. But, some people, some organization would say that this is not a zero-sum game. They want them to talk about hardcore green issues too, instead of just, environmental technologies, brown issues, recycling, all that. And unfortunately for the activists or the environmentalists, there's this problem of a shrinking space for nature conservation politics, both literally and metaphorically. The political space for discussion is much constrained now, because as I explained, we can use the idea of post-political condition to explain that. Also physically, it's getting, well, we don't have much left, so there's very little to protect anyway. So I'm talking about, nature conservation sites. So there's a physical shrinking space there. So what I want to conclude is this, and to go back to my title, the nature of development. So the environmentalists question the nature of, not just the environmentalists, I have to say, but it could be any concerned member of a public. They question the nature of Singapore's development to no avail. So in such a scenario, development as economic advancement becomes the unquestioned central logic of sustainable development initiatives, where other greener concerns are reworked to be compliant to it. And the other phrase, development of nature. So we have a situation now, and this is really not unique to Singapore. Okay, a lot of other places are having the same kind of ideological shift. So in the case of Singapore, we are exporting our expertise of green city building, clean water technologies to other places. This is one way in which we develop nature, where nature is viewed as an arena in need of human modification and improvement, where nature, and actually the concern for nature as well, is something that can be profited upon. Okay, I started the presentation by qualifying that this is meant to stir debate, and it's almost polemic and a little bit provocative. So I want to, okay, this is the final slide actually, to talk about how the two relationships I talked about earlier is actually complementary. There's no reason to put them together as though they oppose each other, because it is indeed not a zero-sum game. Okay, the techno-scientific development of nature and environment does not contradict the environmentalist goals of protecting nature from development. They are actually both very worthwhile projects to actively pursue. And to me, it is a pity that at present, it seems that one has overwhelmed the other in terms of ideas, actions, and public debate. Thank you. I'll end here.
Thank you very much, Harvey, for that provocative session, and I'm sure that will provoke some discussion and questions later on. Now, as we move on to the nurture aspect of this session, and Dr. Choo HyeKyung is an assistant professor from the Department of Social Work. Her research interests are in three areas. Number one, immigrants and their children's health and health-related behaviors. Secondly, the psychosocial needs of patients in healthcare settings. And thirdly, adolescents' pathological video gaming behaviors. Now, it's this third research area from which today's talk is derived. HyeKyung has done large-scale surveys on Singaporean children and adolescents, focusing on the secondary school children's health risk behaviors, and a longitudinal study on children's video gaming addictions. I have a nephew who is quite addicted to video gaming, so I'll be listening very carefully to what HyeKyung has to say. The title of her talk is Children's Gaming Addiction. Does parent-child relationship matter? HyeKyung, please.
Thank you for the introduction, Prof. Chang. Hello, I'm HyeKyung from Department of Social Work. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to thank the faculty for giving me this opportunity to present some research findings about children and adolescents' video gaming behaviors in Singapore. The study I'm going to present here is part of the entire research project entitled Effects of Digital Gaming on Children and Adolescents in Singapore, funded by MOE and MDA. This research project is quite multidisciplinary and multi-institutional one. The whole research team from psychology, social work, and new media and mass communication and psychiatry. Not only that, I as a co-PI, I'm from NUS, but the PI of this project, Associate Prof. Choo, who's here, is from NIE, and other research members are from Iowa State University, NTU, Hong Kong Poly U, and Institution of Mental Health in Singapore. And additionally, I would like to say it could be like a multinational, but not as the study site. It's not multinational study yet. I mean, as a study, but the research members' nationality are all also very diverse. About 2006, which is already like 5 years ago, this study started. And some research findings from this project actually have already been out in media more than a few times. But somehow I haven't had any chance to share this study with my colleague within the faculty. So I truly value this opportunity, hoping that there will be a lot of useful feedback from you for the future study of this area of work. Okay. Let's look at video gaming addiction. I'm sure the term video gaming addiction doesn't sound unfamiliar to you because these days many people often use this term very colloquially. But for researchers, clinicians, and other helping professionals, it is not a very clear-cut matter. In fact, there has been long controversy over this term video gaming addiction. Some researchers argue that the concept of addiction doesn't apply to video gaming because we don't know what is the addictive elements in games. Unlike substances like the cigarette, alcohol, or other illicit drugs, we can chemically define what is the addictive, the chemicals, elements in those substances. But if you look at the video gaming, the behaviors of video games, what is the addictive element in the games? We don't know about it. So some people hesitate to call there's an addiction problem in video gaming. But however, you may wonder, what else term you can use to describe someone is so into playing games, so he or she doesn't go to work, or doesn't go to school, or doesn't eat, doesn't sleep, or even some of them die from playing playing games is so hard. Then maybe, just one term you can think of is addiction problem, right? So because of that, some people classify this one under the category of behavioral addiction, like gambling. And also some researchers do not use the term addiction for these behaviors, but instead use pathological video gaming. So in this presentation, I'm going to interchangeably use the video gaming addiction or pathological video gaming. Also, even if video gaming addiction can be classified under the behavioral addiction, still the seriousness of this problem is not well recognized. It's mostly because other addictions, think about the drug addictions, it involves lots of illegal activities. So especially if it's by adolescents, you can say, it's underage smoking or underage drinking, or there will be drug trafficking or involvement in gang activities and etc. But compared to this substance the addiction, if you look at video gaming addiction, it looks a lot more like a benign. So because it doesn't involve not many illegal activities. So, well, maybe I would say there could be virtual crimes or virtual, the illegal activities in the gaming world, though. But people don't see much of the seriousness of this problem. So that's why researchers and practitioners, they have had reservation to call this phenomenon at issue as an addiction and had a difficult time to conceptualizing this as a problem. Well, anyway, because to some people, it could be just watching too much TV. However, the numerous research efforts and clinical observations and media reports that have been made for the past 2 decades are quite consistently suggestive of the existence of video gaming addiction and its seriousness. And just last year, American Psychiatric Association announced that the 5th version of Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders will be released in 2 years, and that in the new edition of DSM, internet addiction, it would include online gaming addiction as well, would be included in the manual's appendix, although it's not classified as a clinical mental disorder. And they also encourage the more research on this issue for future inclusion of internet addiction in MSM, the future version of MSM. So I would say this is probably the most official the acknowledgement of the existence of gaming addiction for now, but as mentioned previously, further empirical evidence is still much needed. Then how we define the video gaming addiction. If you look at the literature on video gaming addiction or pathological video gaming is commonly defined as gaming activities that damage the individual's social, occupational, family, school, and psychological functioning with some addictive symptoms. So there should be, number one, damage or impairment in their psychosocial functioning. Number two, it comes with some addictive symptoms like preoccupation, meaning thinking more and more about the game, playing games, and then tolerance, meaning that you have to play more and more time or spend more and more money to get same amount of excitement or pleasure of playing video games. And another addictive symptom is the loss of control. You know, you have to stop playing or play less, but you can't. Or withdrawal symptoms, meaning that when you are not playing, then you feel irritated or restless. And also another addictive symptom, which is escape. So you play a game to escape from bad feelings or stresses. So it's not, it doesn't necessarily equal to playing just long hours. Yeah. We have some cases where the students play long hours, play games for long hours, but they are still functional. I mean, they go to school, they finish their homework, and then their grades are decent, and then not much of conflict in the household. Then we don't call it as an addiction. But even if a child plays the game not too long, but if these kind of symptoms are presenting in his or her behavior of gaming, then we can consider this one as an addiction. Okay, then what do we know about the video gaming addiction so far? The studies that measured and examined the video gaming addiction based on such a definition I just described now, mostly ones that validate the measurement of video gaming addiction. So in the literature, you can see a lot of research evidence regarding the correlates or what are correlated with the gaming addiction, particularly the psychosocial correlates and social environmental correlates. For example, like ADHD are highly correlated with video gaming addiction, hostility or sensation seeking, or the boredom or loneliness, and the poor family functionings are all associated with video gaming addiction. However, this is just the jigsaw puzzle pieces yet. We don't exactly know the etiology of video gaming, meaning that the etiology of video gaming addiction is not established yet. Probably similar to other addiction problems, etiology of video gaming addiction would be including the biological aspect or psychological aspect and social environmental aspect, and the interaction between the factors from these three domains, but mainly due to the lack of longitudinal data, an etiological model of video gaming addiction is unavailable yet. And another limitation in the current knowledge about video gaming addiction is there is very little understanding about ecological contributors to change in video gaming addiction over time. In correlational research conducted thus far, ecological contributors are not so different from the social environmental factors I just mentioned. However, again, due to the lack of the longitudinal data, it is unclear this social relationship or social environment actually facilitate alleviation or deterioration of video gaming over time. For me, what type of social relationships or the environmental factors actually contribute to change in video gaming addiction is an important issue in research, because the knowledge can provide direct implication for how to change video gaming addiction. In other words, how to resolve the problem of video gaming addiction. I'm particularly interested in the family relationships, particularly the parent-child relationships. If you look at the literature on addiction in general, any type of addiction, the addiction has a very well-known association with family-related factors, such as family structure, family functioning, or family conflict, or the modeling the family members with a certain type of addiction problem, or parent-child closeness or attachment, and parenting, especially the parental control. I think the video gaming addiction or pathological video gaming is no exception. So, however, the number of studies that actually looked at family or parental factors associated with video gaming addiction is very limited. You will find only like a few, maybe several at most sort of things. And but the good news is these studies, although in limited numbers, rather consistently indicates the significance of these familial aspects, except the modeling part. And but again, because these are mostly the cross-sectional studies, an issue of reverse causality often arises, meaning that, okay, we know the correlation between family conflict and video gaming addiction. You may want to say, okay, the family conflict actually results in video game addiction. But the other way around could be true too. Maybe because of you have a kid with the video gaming addiction problem, so you may have a family conflict because of that problem behavior. So again, longitudinal data would make this possible to sort out the temporal order between which actually result in the which one. In this study, I formulated my study hypothesis based on attachment theory to test its applicability to video gaming addiction. As many of you know, the basic idea of attachment theory is that the child's emotional bond with the parents is crucial in child development. That's one thing. And then the second thing is the child emotional bonds to the parents prevents the child from doing anything that might compromise the relationship. In other words, the effective behavioral control by parents must be based on the child emotional attachment to the parents. This attachment theory has been tested so widely in research on children and adolescents to explain their problem behaviors and addiction in general. But in research literature on video gaming addiction, however, there is very limited evidence that supports attachment theory. While the main effect of parent-child closeness on video gaming addiction has been found, there is little research that tested the effect of parental control on video gaming addiction, and the moderating effect of parent-child closeness on the relationship between parent and parental control and the change in video game addiction over time. So this study aims to describe the extent to which video gaming addiction symptoms changed over a year, and to explore whether parents contributed to the change in their children's video gaming symptoms. Specifically, I hypothesized that there would be the main effect of parent-child closeness and the main effect of parental restriction of children's child gaming behavior on change in video gaming addiction. And then another hypothesis is that there would be moderating effect of parent-child closeness in the relationship between parental restriction and the change in video gaming addiction. So I used the data from this project, Effects of Digital Gaming on Children and Teenagers in Singapore, which is 3-year longitudinal study started in 2006, and then its data collection was done in 2 years ago, 2009. And data were collected from about 3,000 children and adolescents in primary 3, primary 4, secondary 1, and secondary 2. Which is a non-probability, the convenience sample from 12 schools. And for this particular study, I analyzed wave 1 and wave 2 data. And then how did we measure video gaming addiction, otherwise pathological video gaming? We used the 10 items, which is modified based on the DSM-4 criteria for pathological gambling. Again, this can be classified under the behavioral addiction, so that's why we use the criteria for pathological gambling. The 10 items look like this. We asked them, in the past year, has your schoolwork suffered because you spent too much time playing computer or video games, which is about their school functioning, impairment in their school functioning. The second item is also about their school functioning as well. The third one, do you need to spend more and more time or more money on video gaming and video games to feel the same amount of excitement, which is about tolerance, which is not the impairment in their functioning, but the addictive symptom. Number 4 is also the addictive symptoms, which is the escape. Number 5 is about the occupation, another addictive symptom. Number 6 is social functioning, the stealing, rule-breaking behavior. Number 7 is the loss of control. Number 8 is about the withdrawal symptoms, and number 9 and number 10 is also about impairment in social functioning. And then we gave them like 3 response options. Yes means when they report yes to an item, then it counted as 1 symptom. If they respond to the sometimes, then it is counted as half symptom, and then the no is counted as 0 symptoms. And then the total number of pathological symptoms of video gaming at wave 1 and wave 2 were calculated. And because I'm more interested in changing in video gaming addiction over a year, I subtracted the total number of symptoms at wave 1 from the depth of symptoms at wave 2. And then I classified the values in this variable into 3 groups, one with increased number of symptoms, and another one is decreased the number of symptoms, and then the third one is the group with no change in the number of symptoms reported over 1 year. And then we measure parent-child closeness. We used the average score of 6 items, like I feel close to my mother, or I feel close to my father, and etc., with response options by 4-point scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And then the parental restriction of video gaming is also measured using 3 items. It's about how their parents restrict or ban the child playing certain video games. Do they really set the specific the playing video gaming hours or not, or do they specify the type of video games they can play or not? And then we ask them about the frequency about all these items. And then in the analytic models, I included age, gender, race, and socioeconomic status measured by housing types as a control variable, demographic control variables. And I also included the impulsivity, the score at wave 1 in the analytic model for control. It's mainly because we borrow this selection, the symptom criteria from the pathological gambling, which is under the impulsivity control problems. So I control the impulsivity at wave 1. And also because I'm looking at the change in the video gaming addiction, I also control the total number of video gaming addiction symptoms at wave 1. And then I analyze the data using multinomial logic analysis. Before I move on to the multivariate analysis result, I would like to give you some snapshot of this the pathological status of video gaming among our children and adolescents. Okay, the prevalence of pathological gamers. Pathological gamers, by definition, they are those who reported 5 or more symptoms out of those 10. Okay, how many pathological gamers in our sample did we have? It's around like 8.7%. And then if you look at studies done in other countries using quite similar measurement and then using the quite similar cutoff score to define pathological versus non-pathological gamers, the figures are around like between 8 and 10%. So Singapore's the prevalence in Singapore is not so bad or not so low, not so high compared to those of other countries. And then average symptoms reported from the entire sample is about 2 symptoms, so far below the 5 symptoms. And then average number of hours playing per week is about 20 hours. This is surprising. Maybe, it's higher than you think. Could be overestimation, but we weighted the data by gender and race, and then we still come up with this number. But if you look at the number of hours playing games per week among pathological gamers, those who reported 5 or more symptoms out of 10, it's a lot more higher than 20 hours, which is 37 hours. And how did the video gaming addiction symptoms change over a year? Well, those who reported decreased number of symptoms is about 35% of the entire sample, which is not the bad news. But if you look at those who reported increased number of symptoms over a year, it is more than half of the entire sample, 52%. And then about 13% of respondents, they reported no change in the number of symptoms of pathological gaming. Okay, then I have results from the multivariate analysis to see the effect of parent-child closeness on the change in video gaming addiction. The results suggest that the student with higher parent-child closeness were more likely to report decrease rather than increase in the pathological symptoms over a year. Those in bold and italic, they are significant. The statistically significant the result. And I also did subgroup analysis by the primary school student versus secondary school students. And the result shows the same pattern for primary school students, suggesting that the primary school students with a higher parent-child closeness were more likely to report decrease rather than increase in pathological symptoms over a year. But if you look at secondary school students, the parent-child close effect of parent-child closeness didn't hold, for this group of students. Only the impulsivity matters. And I also did another subgroup analysis by gender. So this is the result from the male students, boys. And for boys, yes, the parent-child closeness did have an effect on the decrease in number of symptoms rather than, the increase in number of symptoms of pathological gaming. But if you look at girls, actually nothing was found to be significant. So maybe this model doesn't work for the female students with gaming addiction, maybe or may not. So in sum, the significant effect of higher parent-child closeness on decrease in video gaming addiction was found, especially the significant effect held for primary school students and boys, but there was no effect of parental restriction of gaming on change in video gaming addiction. Also, there was no moderating effect of parent-child closeness on the relationship between parental restriction and change in video gaming addiction. I didn't really explain this, the model too. This is all about the moderating effect of parent-child relationship on the relationship between the parent restriction and the video gaming addiction, but none of the result shows its significance, right? Okay, so these study finding indicates, provide the partial support for attachment theory for video gaming addiction among children and adolescents in Singapore. In other words, the parent-child closeness is important in understanding the change in their video gaming addiction behaviors, yes, but it doesn't necessarily moderate, it doesn't necessarily make parental restriction of gaming behavior effective in decrease of the symptoms of pathological video gaming. And then I would like to discuss a little bit more about the no effect of parental restriction of child gaming. So often you may think, the parents, they should be firm about their video gaming behavior. Like you have to set the time, you have to set the rules for the types of game they play, and etc. But it doesn't seem to work according to this data, at least. So I come up with a few ideas why is that so. Maybe Asian parenting is already very controlling compared to that of the parents in other, especially the Western countries maybe. Yeah. So their parental control is already high. So maybe the parental restriction of their video gaming behavior is just perceived as a usual nagging by the children. That's why, we need more empirical evidence for this one. So they don't respond to this kind of parenting. Yeah, maybe that's one explanation. Another explanation is based on the nature of the pathological nature of the video gaming addiction, meaning that it's not just about repetitive behavior, they're just playing and playing. Or it's just not about the impairment in their psychosocial functioning, but it also involves some addictive symptoms, like I said, withdrawal, loss of control, preoccupation, intolerance, and escape, and etc., which I think as a reflection of deep-seated psychological needs, which cannot be very well addressed by just rule setting or controlling. And then another reason for no effect of the parental restriction could be inadequate measures we use because we only use 3 items. From this study, I would like to suggest some of the intervention for intervention strategies. Family intervention, to be precise, intervention for improving parent-child relationship could be quite helpful, especially for young kids. When they are in primary school. And also, we need to consider more gender-specific intervention strategies for video gaming addiction because, as you just saw, they have very different patterns in their video gaming behaviors. Also, the change in video gaming behaviors. So this is all my presentation. Okay, thank you very much.
So the floor is now open for comments, questions, and suggestions to our two speakers. Harvey Neo, who's spoken earlier on the nature of development and development of nature, a view from Singapore, and of course, Choo HyeKyung, who's just spoken about parent-child relationship and that role in children's addictions. Yeah, so please go to the microphones to ask your questions, because we need that to be taped into the video recording system. Indicate your name, your designation, where you come from, and address your questions or comments to our speakers, please. Anybody would like to get the ball rolling with a first question or comment?
Singapore is a very difficult balance to maintain economic growth and environmental protection. Is it wrong to say that economic priority take precedence over so-called environmental protection? In terms of, is it wrong to say that we have to just minimize damage to environment in terms of maybe as long as we keep the air clean, less air pollution, and so that people clean water, and we can compromise on greeneries. Maybe a lot of land has been cleared for housing. There's a tension in terms of housing, rising demand for houses. Therefore, need more land. Like example, my place, I live in the Tampines. I can see I shoot it because there was so much greeneries and forests, but for past 16 years, I've seen patch by patch of greeneries going, and new condominium coming up. So I was very upset, to be frank. Very upset because I see that there are more concrete jungle than green jungles. But then there's always argument that says that, because there are not enough houses, people have demand. So government still preserve some of the quarry area so that there will be still some greeneries. Within the estate, I have at least 2 quarries that make into parks, very beautiful parks. So would that consider as also environmental conservation in your definition? That's the first question. A second question is for Prof. Regarding the parent-child relationship. I just want to understand when you put parent-child relationship, how much dimension are you looking into? Is it the time spent with the parent, between parent and child, the supervision part, or how are they communicating? Because I think it's a very broad. Does it mean that sometimes if you spend less time with the child, we are saying we have less parent-child relationship, or is it the quality time or quantity time, things like that?
Thank you for your question. To answer your question, yes, we should obviously be cognizant of the fact that there is a constant tension between development, economic development, and say protecting particular users of land. I think that as a general rule, that is something that most people can accept. But if you look at particular cases on the ground, it doesn't seem that it's always the case of good development taking place, and nature places being lost. So your example of your neighborhood, it is a good example. A better example would be building condominiums closer and closer to Bukit Timah Nature Reserve. Is that good development? Does the housing argument still hold in that scenario? Or maybe the case that I talked about earlier, expanding golf courses, is that necessarily good development? Is that something that we definitely have to have? So these are issues that we can only grapple with when we look at actual happenings on the ground. So I will agree broadly with you, but it seems that there are so many exceptions to that rule that we have to be very wary when someone says that, oh, we are doing as much as we can, you know, where's the evidence, you know? Broadly true, but there are so many key significant counterexamples to that we have to be a little bit skeptical. Okay.
Thank you. The title says, okay, the parent-child relationship matters. But very specifically in my study, I looked at the parent-child closeness, which is measured by the perception of the children and adolescent children about their parent-child relationship, how closely they feel to their mothers, fathers, and then overall how satisfied they are with their parent-child relationship, which is not about the communication style. Okay, so I didn't look at it. We don't have the data available for that kind of concept. And it's more about, like I said, I mean, in the attachment theory, it's more about emotional bond. I mean, the closeness, yeah, between parent and child. That's what I looked at. But I cannot really say, okay, does it come from the quantity of time or quality of time? I don't know. I don't have knowledge about it. But yeah, it's a good question. I mean, because then how can we build parent-child closeness? I mean, parent-child attachment. That's another issue we need to talk about. But in this particular study, I looked at parent-child bond or closeness, yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for that question. Do we have a second question or comment? Yes, please.
Okay, my name's Margie Hall. I've got various points. I'll speak first as a parent on one issue and then as a conservationist, and I'm Honorary Secretary of the Nature Society at the moment, so I will speak to some extent for the conservationists, although I will make the point that Nature Society is very, very democratic, and we try to make our decisions by consensus, but that means that no one of us ever speaks for the society, right? We speak for ourselves. So, first of all, as a parent, what I would say to the issue on video gaming is that the analysis is gendered in relation to the gamers, the child gamers, but the analysis was not gendered in relation to the parents. And parents are males and females as well. And the amount of time that male parents and female parents have with male children, female children, and cross-cutting, respectively, is very, very different. And I think an analysis which talks about parental supervision is losing that whole richness of mother to son, mother to daughter, father to son, father to daughter, which varies. And therefore, I think that may explain partly why you didn't get anywhere, in a sense, with a certain stage of the analysis. Until you find out whether it's mothers trying to supervise or be close to boys, or fathers trying to supervise or be close to boys, and with regard to daughters as well, I don't think you can produce anything meaningful. Because we are, a lot of the time, parents, but we are also female parents or male parents, right? And we're also relating to the other parent, right? There is the other parent interaction, very often confusing, possibly supporting, possibly confusing what the other does. So I think you've lost all the richness of family life or people who set it up and collected the data in a certain way have left you unable to analyze the data very well because it's done on such a sort of crude, broad level. Okay, the other point is, yes, I agree with Harvey's overall analysis. And I agree very strongly with his point. Of course there is a tension. There always will be a tension between material development and the needs of biodiversity conservation. It cannot be otherwise. And you cannot just talk about balance as if somehow balance is just the answer to it. Balance is tipped one way, balance is tipped another way. And as you said very clearly, consensus usually means one side losing out over and over and over again, right? And by and large, it is the nature conservation side that tends to lose out, although I think, and this is where I would come in, I think some of the details of your stages, I would disagree with you. I think it's always been hard to be a conservationist in Singapore. And it sometimes depends on what else is going on and what's supposed to happen in the area that you're trying to conserve, as well as to why it sometimes seems easy to speak out on some issues, and sometimes it's very hard to speak out on other issues when they ought to be the same, but they're not because of the kind of what's intended for that area, right? And I think there are a lot more examples than the Kranji example for you to use, which you obviously know. You obviously just brought in one here. So I think it's always been difficult. To me, Singapore has always been post-political. I've been here 30 years. And you know, I wouldn't say we've reached a stage that what you describe as post-political seems to me the way it was always. So some of the details of your stages I would disagree with, but I do agree with you very strongly in pointing out, and I think this is very important, that the government recently, the developmental state, jumped on the sustainable bandwagon. As soon as they heard this word sustainability, as soon as they realized the rest of the world was going towards becoming a bit greener. We've got to become greener because we produce marvelous cities, and now our marvelous cities that we're trying to sell to the world have got to be green cities, right? But as you say, in certain elements, they're not green at all, and essentially that meaning of green is actually the brown issue of green, right? It's not the real green issue meaning of green. So I agree with you that thus jumping on the bandwagon of sustainability in order to make lots and lots of money, and there's lots of money to be made out of it, is the next stage of the developmental state. And it means that conservationists have to be more precise and more clear when they're pushing for things. But I don't want to go on at length. So.
Yes, yeah, thank you very much for your very useful comment. In fact, it's not impossible to analyze the the parent-child closeness by gender. In fact, we do have information about the gender of respondents, students, and plus we asked the questions about parent-child closeness separately for mother and father. But unfortunately, we didn't ask who actually restrict their video gaming behaviors. Which parents, yeah. That part I can go that far, but it's not impossible to analyze, okay, father-daughter relationship or the closeness matters more than, or the mother-son, the closeness matters more in explaining the video gaming addiction. But if there's any future research, or if we do look at parent-child relationship and then family dynamics more qualitatively, maybe, yeah, we will find some interesting findings from such studies about the parent-child closeness by gender, plus the parental supervision by the specific the parents. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all your comments. Very interesting comments. I do agree with you. I've worked with a lot of NGOs, not just NSS, and it's always been difficult for them to achieve half of what they want to achieve in Singapore. I guess the 3 periods that I did up was a little bit generalized, and I agree with that. And when I say that there has been an increased contestations in the 1990s to early 2000s, it does not. I didn't want to give the impression that suddenly, there were more space for NGOs to voice their opinions. Not necessarily the case. This period coincides with the period of very, very rapid development in Singapore. So there was a window of opportunity that presented to, say, environmental NGOs, and this window of opportunity was so huge that the mass media and the public cannot ignore. So in that sense, contextually, it was good for them to raise their voices at that period of time. Your comment about post-political, yes, I agree in part, because it seems that the outcome has always been the same. You say you've been here 30 years, and probably that's pretty true for the past 30, 40 years. The interesting thing about post-political condition as used in Singapore is that although the outcome is the same, I would say that the process is interestingly different. And the process is very, very important. I would say the turn to a post-political kind of consensus making makes it even harder to insert what you want, your particular demands. I think that's the beauty or the ugliness of post-politics. I mean, depending which side you stand on. So yeah, I agree with you. The outcome is nothing seems to have changed, but the process is somewhat different. Thanks.
Hello, hi, I'm Paul from Department of Geography, FASS. I have a comment and followed by a question for Prof. Choo. The first one is a comment, it's slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I'm a parent myself of 2 young daughters who are not old enough to be addicted to gaming yet, but no matter how hard I try to play video games, I can never get myself addicted because I can't even get past the stage of reading up all the instructions, like warfare and all that. So ironically, attention deficit in that sense. Now, the more serious question is, being a geographer, I'm also interested in where these gaming takes place. And in your study, you pointed out that a parent-child relationship has a moderating effect. But the question is, where do these gaming activities take place? So if they take place at home, perhaps the parent-child relationship does have a moderating effect. But the way I'm seeing, a lot of these gaming takes place in LAN shops. For example, just a stone's throw away in West Coast Mall, the new video shop, gaming shop has been set up, and lots of students go in there, spend maybe half a day there. So in that context, in that place, arguably the parent-child moderating effect might be a little weaker. Would you say that? So in other words, my question is, in your study, do you also take into account of where these gaming activities take place?
Okay, mostly they play games at home. Yeah, according to the data. Yeah, and they also do go to LAN shops too. Yeah, those who go to the LAN shops, the computer gaming shops. Yeah, they are rather hardcore. Yeah, the players. Yes, that's true. But basically, the attachment theory tells us if the child-parent, the emotional bondage is strong enough, okay, then the child wouldn't do something that actually compromise the relationship with the parents. So it doesn't matter. Probably, maybe the child can go to the LAN shop or play just games at home. It doesn't matter. As far as the parent-child closeness is there, and then if it's strong enough, then the kid may not go into the level of addiction. That's what this study tells us about. Yeah. Is that your answer to your question then? Yeah, okay.
I'm just wondering, one of your earlier points was also parents, whether they set a model, set an example for children. And I think it's not just children who are addicted, right? I mean, parents need not necessarily be addicted to gaming. It could be addicted to online gambling, online shopping, online whatever. So I'm just wondering whether that parental modeling of being addicted to a different sort of preoccupation, whether that also explains children addiction in any way.
Oh, that part is completely missing in current research knowledge. Yeah, I would say. Firstly, it's because as far as I know, there's no such data that tells us about their parents' addictive behavior in relation to the child video gaming. But if you look at other addiction literature, yeah, there's a tons of pieces of evidence that tells us, okay, it could be the social learning from their parents. And it doesn't have to be necessarily one particular type of addictive behavior to the same one, but it could be, one addictive behavior, and then it could lead to a child another type of addiction behavior, which is possible. That is also happens within the same individual. But we don't have empirical evidence for that yet. So that's why that the American Psychiatric Association, who they made that the DSM-4, 5, 6, and etc. They will look into more research evidence for that. Mm-hmm.
Are there any more questions for either Dr. Neo or Dr. Choo before we head for lunch? Yes, please.
Sorry, just one more question about the environmental issue. So, I'm trying to find answer to that question. I think some time back there was a report by international environmental agencies that rate Singapore as one of the worst environmental conservationists. They based on at the rate we clear our land, forest land. I don't know whether you read about the article. And then I think I roughly read the article. Singapore's reply was that we cannot apply the international yardstick to our Singapore, because this doesn't apply to Indonesia, Malaysia. When they clear forests, they use that to measure. But Singapore, we cannot use the same measure because of our uniqueness. Do you think it's a fair statement in that case? And therefore, is there such thing as a standard measure of conservation? Just this question for you. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a very good question. I think you can find exceptionalism in any country on every issue that you want to. So I think in theory, that is a weak argument. That's from my perspective, because we should never argue from exceptionalism. If we subscribe that there is a better way to do things, and that way can be done, you should not retreat to but we are special, we are different. The kinds of norms that you subscribe to doesn't apply to us. That's a fundamental position that I have. Having said that, I think even if we take, there are various global standards you can abide by. Let's say from the World Conservation Union, it suggests that 5% of the original forest cover should be kept intact. I think that's not a very high percentage. I think that's perfectly doable. Singapore is very good at urban planning and planning. I don't see why that cannot be done, but obviously that has not been done, and that will probably not be done. So it's too easy to say that, well, because we are small. 5% of small is smaller than 5% of big, right? So it's a proportional degree we are talking about here. I don't think it's impossible, but for some reasons we are not even aspiring to do that, and I think that is a fundamental problem. And it also relates to the fact that we don't even have a decent, sensible discussion on this. There was no talk, no discussion on how to proceed. So I think that is lacking as well. A very transparent, honest debate on issues such as that you've raised.
There is a second part of the Singapore Research Nexus launch, and it starts at 2 p.m. right here again. Now, it focuses specifically on language and mother tongue policy in cosmopolitan and global city Singapore. So 4 of our colleagues will be here to share with you on the 4 languages in Singapore and how what some of these policies, changes, and challenges would be in cosmopolitan Singapore. Thank you very much and enjoy your lunch. And thank you to our 2 speakers as well for the stimulating ideas. Thank you.